My name's Sean Hewitt, and we're Idiot Wind, me and my colleague and associate, Mr. Sid Smith. And we're blustering our way through Dylan Vinyl, the definitive collection. And incredibly, even though we look like two strapping young lads in our late teens, we are now on part 27 of this. And this is a very epochal album. We are now one of Sid Smith's favourite albums of all time. So we've got to be there's an air of reverence here. Sid, as you know, is a major Deadhead, and he worships the band led by Ben and Jerry from the ice cream company. It's a band called the Grateful Dead, and it's got everything Sid likes. They noodle around for hours on the same song, and you can't remember any of the tunes. It's right up Sid's alley. This is a very rare album. It's got Dylan and the Dead, and here's the album cover, and it's very impressive, as you can see. That's one of the greatest album covers of all time. This was released in the year 1989, and I think you can tell that. This is an album cover that's got 1989 all the way through it like a stick of rock. As you can see, I originally thought this was Dylan, this old picture from the 60s, and this was the Dead. But then you see the Dead's wearing a harmonica holder there. So that's meant to be Bob as well. Presumably that's Bob in his glory days, and that's Bob when he was recording this album. And even more fun, you see there's a train coming towards you. I think Rick Griffin, the Grateful Dead's album cover artist, has got the wrong album. He thinks he's doing a cover for Slow Train Coming there. There's no mention of trains on this one as far as I can remember. And if you go to the back cover, it's the train back at a different angle, which doesn't match the front. I think Rick's quite a clever guy. Even funnier, you've got this photo, which is quite a nice photo by the photographer Herb Green. He's a professional photographer, and Bob is looking very much like the star in there. He's in the middle, and he's got an appropriate attitude to having his photograph taken. Unusually for Bob, it must be said, in many circumstances. But what worries me is the demeanour of the gentleman around him. I presume this is the Grateful Dead. I mean, the two at the front are, the one here, that's Jerry Garcia. He's had a break from making ice cream to play on this album. But this other guy here, I don't know who that is. Who's that? Do you know who that is?
No,
but they've got guitars, so I'm certain they're in the group. What I worry about is that row of blokes on the back row. Who are they? I mean, are they the crew? I mean, this guy, he either drives the bus, the guy with glasses, or he's the accountant, isn't he, for the tour? And look at this bloke. Look at that bloke. He's obviously on day release, isn't he? I mean, look at the way he's looking at Jerry Garcia. He's got an expression that says, for all the world, I'm going to bite your head off. I love you, and I'm going to destroy you. So I don't know who these are. I presume it's the road crew or some random standing by. These two, that's Jerry Garcia. God knows who this is. And that's Bob Dylan looking like, get me out of this room as quickly as you can. I'm having my photograph taken and I'm going home. All right, so on the back, there's just some credits. And then on the record itself, there is a wonderful, quite smart actually, label with a logo on. The Dylan and Dead logo, the logo everybody knows. And as you can imagine, this is covered in some depth in the magnificent magazine, which I have to hand.
I was waiting for the magazine.
The magazine is always worth reviewing. And you wonder, what there must have been loads of performance photographs, because they did quite a tour, Dylan and the Dead. So they must have loads of photos, and they have chosen this very interesting photo to put there, the snapshots of the to commemorate this era. Well done, picture editors. I don't know where they've got that one from. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. It's like a horror film, isn't it? Look at that guy. But anyway, usual thing, full of information. Right. Well, Bob is presented with the choice of playing with the Dead, as he wrote in his memoirs, by his manager, Elliot Roberts. And he was given the chance of playing with them in the break, a layoff, in his quite heavy touring in '86 and '87 with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Elliot Roberts set up some shows for me to do with the Grateful Dead. I needed to go rehearse with the band for these shows. So I went to San Rafael to meet with the Dead. And he says here, I thought it would be as easy as jumping rope. And after an hour or so, it became clear to me that the band wanted to rehearse more and different songs than I've been used to doing with Petty. So they wanted to do more of his seldom played songs. And this seems to have been part of the inspiration for the Never Ending tour. He walks out of one early rehearsal and goes to a hotel bar down the road while they're still playing, and hears a jazz band, and he hears that jazz band, and that gives him the inspiration for the Never Ending tour, which starts around this time and is him rejecting the greatest hits kind of approach of the Tom Petty shows and going much deeper into his and other people's back catalogues, doing interesting new arrangements of the songs. From around this time, Bob becomes definitely more of a live performer than a recording artist in many ways. His creative focus is on the stage. But he also says, just before this meeting with the Dead, he thought he was burnt out. He thought he was, he thinks as a performer and a recording artist, he's had his day. For the listeners, he writes, it must have been like going through deserted orchards and dead grass. And he said that the whiskey was out of the bottle. And that's what he says. So he injures his hand in '87 as well, and he can't play for a while. And that makes him think increasingly depressively of where he is creatively. I'd been following established customs and they weren't working. The windows have been boarded up for years and covered with cobwebs, and it's not like I didn't know it. So he's quite clear in this book of how he thinks he is. Anyway, they go on tour. Bob enjoys going on tour with them. He enjoys playing different songs every night, and he asked to join the Grateful Dead. And the Grateful Dead have a vote, and they turn him down. I think one member voted against, and probably one of them who had to keep up with Bob and work out what he was playing every night. But anyway, at the end of the tour, they did this album. And I remember the reviews of this album were uniformly terrible, and it was regarded as a bit of a joke. And Jerry Garcia, who is responsible for the sound of this album, whatever he says, it says produced by Jerry Garcia and John Cutler. There's no mention of Bob or any of his pseudonyms in the production side of this album. Jerry Garcia claims they did a mix of some of the songs. Bob came in and heard it, said he didn't like the choice of the songs or the sound, and chose a different set of songs and played it on his boombox, didn't like their mix, and that's basically what you got here. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if Bob's ever responded to that. It doesn't sound like that's true to me. But it might be, knowing Bob, because he's fucking crackers. But anyway, overall, that's the story behind the album. There they are. If you saw that man walking down the road, wouldn't you cross the street? I mean, I would. What do you think of this album, Sid?
I hadn't seen that photograph before, but if I saw that guy in the middle walking towards me, I would definitely cross the street. Never mind the guy at the back.
Excuse me, I might be mistaken. Are you referring to Bob Dylan?
I am. That's his name.
Yeah.
Well, so I hadn't heard this. As I'd managed to get to this.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was your favourite album of all time. That's what you told me. I'm not saying you're untrustworthy.
I kind of, part of me. So part of me thinks, well, I'd understood that this album is a bit reviled by Dylan fans, a bit reviled by Dead fans as well. And to my ears, I couldn't really see what all the fuss was about. I mean, for me, it sounds just as shoddy as a Bob Dylan live album always sounds. It sounds just as cursory. I mean, I think maybe the Dead sort of side of things. I mean, I'm not as familiar with Grateful Dead live albums as perhaps I should be, but the playing seems okay. You know, I mean, none of it seems especially dire. None of it sounds especially, you know, uplifting or you know, kind of grab you by the lapels. But I thought actually, you know, there was a couple of moments in it where I thought, oh, well, they're obviously just having fun, and you know, what's wrong with that? And then I kind of passed into, I remember sort of slipping into a coma at one point, I think on the number called Joey.
Yes, I'll have to mention Joey in a second.
Right, okay. Well, and I sort of just remember it, I just remember wanting it to end and end quickly. And I realized it wasn't going to. And I'm not sure whose fault that is. I mean, I think
it's your fault, Sid.
I mean, I think, you know, obviously the Grateful Dead are legends for, you know, the you know, empires crash and fall, build and fall during the Grateful Dead sort of live set. But Bob Dylan, when it comes to stretching things out beyond all credulity, Bob Dylan's kind of got plenty of form on that one as well. So it kind of it went on, and I suppose where I came out on it was, I'm grateful. I was grateful that it was only as long as it was. It was only, Wikipedia tells me that side 1 is 21 minutes and side 2 is 22 minutes. In clock time, that's not actually a long time, but listening to it, it felt like fucking time had stopped. And yeah, but to be fair, that usually happens with Bob Dylan albums and me. So and they're usually a good deal longer than 21 minutes a side. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad in one way. So I've finally heard it. I can cross that off me bucket list. And I can safely say I will never listen to it again willingly, or knowingly listen to it ever again.
So that's a 4-star review then.
I've got one question to ask. Why, in your opinion, I know you can't speak to the Grateful Dead side of things, but why in Bob world is this sort of regarded as a poor album by Bob Dylan fans? Why? What makes this bad and that awful live album that we listened to a couple of months ago, and that one a good one? What's the thing that?
Well, I'm not sure the awful live album we listened to a couple of months ago is regarded as a good one.
Okay.
But on this album, I think this album comes after a very poor period for Bob. He's released like Knocked Out, Loaded, and Down in the Groove, which are awful. That's the nadir of his career. Bob isn't a good way critically at this point. No one is looking to Bob to do anything good. And when he comes together with a bunch of, you know, in this country, they're often regarded comically, aren't they, the Grateful Dead? They epitomise a certain kind of band. I've got no beef with them really, but they've never really connected with me. But they're a certain kind of band, aren't they, from a certain kind of era. For a lot of people in this country who, like me, don't really listen to them. And I think him hooking his wagon to them, which, as the book points out, wasn't even his idea, but he went along with it, was seen as laughable. Listening to it in the cold light of day, I don't think it's as bad as it's made out to be. I think it's an average live album. I think some of it's quite good. I quite like their version of Queen Jane Approximately, for example. And I think there's some lovely guitar playing on it from the members of the Grateful Dead. Is that Bob Weir? Is he a guitar player?
Bob Weir, yeah.
Yeah. And Jerry,
he's the other guy opposite Jerry.
Yeah, that must be Weir and Garcia on there. But they are very good. I think they're very good on this record. There's a couple of moments on side 1, and particularly on side 2, where I thought the solos were good. But I agree with you about Joey. I think Joey has the same effect on this record, much more minor as it is, as it does on the far more interesting Desire. No. It grinds the record to a halt. I mean, on Desire, the second side is 28 minutes long because he insists on doing Joey. I don't think he does Joey very often himself. This must be a choice of the Grateful Dead. I don't think you're going to hear Joey very often at a Bob Dylan concert, to be honest. But they do it, and it's fucking dire, isn't it? It's a dire song, lyrically and musically. It's a dirge, and it lasts what seems like forever. How long does it actually last? Does it tell you?
9 minutes. It's 9 minutes.
Yes, let's have a look.
It lasts 9 minutes.
9 minutes 23 seconds. Well, that's way too long, and it's one of my, I would say, least favorite Bob Dylan songs. And the last thing I want to hear on an album with the Grateful Dead on it is them angling their way through Joey. And that must have been one of the songs they surprised him with, saying they wanted to do. But I think it's a terrible song. I think the lyrics are awful, which are off. Jacques Levy knew Joey and was intrigued in writing a song about him. I don't think Bob's bothered about Joey, to be honest, and you can tell by the way he sings it on both versions we've got. So overall, I think it's poor, but I don't think it's this absolute atrocity that it's painted at.
No,
it's people like Michael Gray, the expert, just hates this album with a passion, and it's not one I go to. I wouldn't go to this in my first top 20 Dylan albums. So to play,
I can get away with, as I say, it's not something I would willingly listen to again. But
I must say, by the way, there is some. I've never heard any of these bootlegs, but there is a feeling in the fan community that the bootlegs are much better than this album.
Yeah.
The bootlegs people of the audience have recorded, which all the gigs are recorded, I think, professionally.
Yeah.
These are the songs chosen by somebody to show the tour off. The bootlegs are much better listening than this album, So I don't know because I've not heard them.
Listening to it, I was very taken by Queen Jane. I thought that was. I quite like that. I thought, oh right,
it's a lovely song, and they do it quite well.
I like that song a lot, and I think it's a lovely melody, and the adornments and embellishments that are put in by the band work quite well. What I was surprised about, when I saw that All Along the Watchtower was on the set list, I thought, oh great, this will be a great platform for the Dead to take off, and it never does. I was surprised. I was surprised by how they just sort of stick. They don't stick entirely to the original arrangement, but I was surprised by how underpowered it was. And I guess that's just my expectations. I expected, when you think about All Along the Watchtower, inevitably I always think of the Hendrix version, which is stunning. And I imagined that the Dead would kind of think about the Hendrix version and put their own take on it. And they kind of don't. It's just it's like nobody commits to that track.
It's like a blurry mid-take, half-arsed version, isn't it? It's like
I thought Gotta Serve Somebody. What album's that off again?
Gotta Serve Somebody. That's off Slow Train Coming.
Yeah. And of course it opens with Slow Train, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, not my favorite kind of stuff, but it was all right, I guess. But Queen Jane, approximately, if I had to pick one track, that's the track I would pick.
That's the one I would pick.
Yeah.
It's such a great song, and it's great to hear him do it after all these years. And I think the guitar playing of the others is pretty good, actually. I think you can say several times I listened to this record for this purpose, and I just thought I kept thinking that's a nice bit of guitar solo. That's lovely, and that's all down to the Grateful Dead guitarists, who are very into this stuff. It seems intermittently on this record,
I think
and when they are, they take off on some nice solos.
I think it's worth mentioning, like back in the 70s, I hadn't heard the Grateful Dead. I didn't hear the Grateful Dead until much later, and you know, they came to Newcastle famously in '73, I think, or somewhere around there. And you know, I mean, I could have gone to see them, but I just didn't know anything about them, and I wasn't big on America, you know, what we would now sort of call sort of rootsy American stuff. But I have to say, you know, years later, after discovering some of the Dead stuff, I do like the Grateful Dead, to be fair. And
it's all coming out now.
I used to make the mistake of thinking, oh, it's just noodly rock kind of thing, endless soloing. And it can be that, of course, but every now and again, I mean, I think the early sort of albums that the Grateful Dead do, I think it's a fantastic run of albums, which sound really good, and are genuinely experimental for the time, and have great heights to them. The later period, I'm not so familiar with, you know, but and the live stuff, I never saw them live, and what in theory, I mean, Dylan at this point is so rootless and shiftless in his career, and washed up, as I think he said. And the Dead, I'm not no real reason why the Dead should need to do it, but you know, but there it is. Yeah, so yeah, there it is. We got through. What's the next album we're doing?
Well, our next episode will be part 28 of our ongoing series, and that'll be Bob and Daniel Lenoir making Oh Mercy.